Welcome back, everybody. If you're still standing back there talking, come join us. We have an exciting panel that we have scheduled here. I'm excited to be here with this group talking about enterprise technology and education. And what I thought I'd start off is I'll introduce our panelists, and then we have a series of questions that I'll ask them, and then we'll open it up for your questions. So first of all, let's start down on the end, and we have Phillip Duran. He's the Senior Climate Action Analyst with the Austin Climate Action and Resilience. He has 15 years of experience in sustainability, policy implementation, and strategic leadership. He manages the in-house science, research, and innovation for Austin Climate Action and Resilience, and he focuses on emerging sustainability technologies and identifies high-impact climate interventions to strategically support partners across the community. Collaborating with elected officials, city staff, and residents, Phillip and his team developed the science underpinning the Austin Climate Equity Plan and the new Comprehensive Climate Implementation Plan and the Austin Regional Priority Climate Action Plan, which successfully secured $48 million in an implementation grant. And his current work focuses on driving the sustainability of city operations and securing ongoing support for local climate action. So let's welcome Phillip, everybody. So Michael Weber, he's a professor and the Cockrell Family Chair in Engineering here at UT Austin. He's also the Sid Richardson Chair in the LBJ School of Public Affairs. And the engineering school is the number 16 Department of Mechanical Engineering in the U.S. and here at UT Austin. In addition to his role as a faculty member, from August of 21 to September of 2024, he served as the CTO of Energy Impact Partners, which was a $5 billion venture fund focused on investments in clean tech and climate tech startups with the potential for deep decarbonization at speed and scale. Furthermore, from September of 2018 to August 2021, he was based in Paris, France, where he served as the Chief Science and Technology Officer for ENGIE, one of the world's largest energy companies. Now, here at UT Austin, he really serves at the convergence of engineering, policy, and commercialization on topics that are related to innovation, energy, and the environment. His group's research tackles these kind of complex energy analyses with a deep record of expertise in grid reliability, the hydrogen sector, and the built environment, and food, energy, water, waste nexus. So among the many executive advisory roles that he serves in, he also serves on the board of GTI Energy, which is an industry consortium, formerly known as Gas Technology Institute, and he's on the Science Advisory Council for ENGIE in Paris. He's authored and co-authored more than 600 publications, including 5 full-length general interest books, and he holds 6 patents. So let's welcome Michael. And we have Dawn James. She's the founder and managing partner, principal of Sustainability and Leadership and Training, LLC. She's a sustainability strategist, and she founded this group where she helps organizations navigate the intersection of energy, digital transformation, and climate innovation. She has more than 26 years of experience, including leadership roles at Deloitte and Microsoft, and has guided companies in aligning emerging technologies with business strategy and societal impact. Trained as a geoscientist, Dawn brings a systems-level perspective to conversations around AI, ethics, and infrastructure. She's actively engaged in clean energy leadership initiatives and advancing responsible, inclusive technology adoption. So let's welcome Dawn. All right, so we have a really experienced group here that I think is going to lead us through some fascinating topics this afternoon. So I just want to start off and have each of you tell us a little bit about your work and what led you to be interested in the topic of sustainability as it relates to the use of AI technologies. Who wants to go first? Dawn, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Happy to start off. So first of all, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you all for being here. It's such a pleasure to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. So what I would say is that I started off my career as a geoscientist, as was mentioned. I started off in geotechnical engineering and working in water systems. I've spent the first 15 years of my career really focused as an individual contributor on studying and researching and also doing a lot of execution implementation on subsurface systems. And the latter part of my career, I focused a lot more on energy systems, working in traditional energy, and then also technology and clean tech. And so I feel like over time, working in strategy, especially at very large influential companies like Microsoft and also Deloitte, I really started honing in on that intersection of energy, digital technology, and sustainability, and what that means in a large commercial sense, and how that impacts our everyday lives. And so I think that what really kind of pulled me into this space when we start talking about AI, large language models, data analytics, ML, all of the things under the sun that goes into this sort of digital technology ecosystem that we're all living in, is connecting the dots between what a lot of times feels intangible to the physical world. Like what does this actually mean for our resources? What does this actually mean as a footprint? What do we put our fingers on that's tangible and physical that's related to the computational analysis that we're doing in our computers? And that's always been something that I've been interested in. I do a lot of teaching. I have young children, and I love the questions that I get. And one of the biggest questions that I get from working at Microsoft, working at the nexus of where a lot of this stuff is coming out of, is what is the cloud? How are these things connected? What are the physical things that I can touch with my fingers that's related to how we're actually running these different very large computations? And so that's where I really spend a lot of my time. We talk a little bit about the built environment and infrastructure and what this actually means for our water, for our energy, and what does that balance look like? And so I really feel that this is a philosophical question. I feel that this is a societal question, and also it's a scientific question. And I think it takes all of our minds. This is what I always say is the probably the most important group project of our times, because it takes all of our minds to be able to do this in a way that's transparent and then also intentional, right? Because to me, just like all the technology that we've talked about today, I remember a time before the internet. I remember before we had computers in our hand and we could walk around with laptops, right? This is a wave that's already here, right? So how are we going to do it in a way that's responsible and intentional so that we can continue to enjoy our resources into the future?
That's great. Thanks, Dawn. I like this group project of our time because I do think it's a great way to talk about interdisciplinary research and bringing everybody together. So, Michael, would you like to share with us?
Yes, but I've got to do a non sequitur real quick, just to say that this room is very important to me. So I was an undergrad here at UT, and I studied aerospace engineer and Plan 2, so a liberal arts degree and an engineering degree. And I fell in love with Julia Cook, who was a trombone player in the Longhorn Band. She was an architecture major. And we got married in this room, about 5 feet behind me. So we're back at my side of my wedding, and our 31st anniversary is coming up in a few weeks. So it's great to be here. Different kind of audience, different setting. And thank you. We got married on this half of the room, and we did the reception in that half of the room. So it was 250 people. It's a big day. We want the best dance floor in Texas. This is it. And it turns out if you're a student, we rented it for $250, cheapest wedding venue around. Wow. Because I graduated one Saturday and we got married the next Saturday. Anyway, so it's good to be back. It's good to see all of you. I've been thinking about AI in a variety of ways over time. When I was at graduate school at Stanford, so I did my undergrad here, then went to Stanford for grad school, I took a class on neural networks, which is sort of relational or foundational math. That's like a mathematical cousin to artificial intelligence. And it's funny because I got an A in the class. I don't even know what a neural network is, which actually was kind of part of the point. I was able to repeat back to the professor what he wanted to hear, and pattern recognition is actually the core of AI, is what it feels like. So maybe I actually understand it without knowing it. But I took a class in 1999 on some of the math that has been around since the 50s. AI is not new. The term AI was coined in 1956. You probably talked about that earlier today. And so I took a math class that was related to it. And then in 2019, I was based in Paris, as you heard, but I organized or moderated a discussion in Abu Dhabi at the World Energy Congress with the person in the United Arab Emirates who's in charge of AI. So since 2017, so 9 years now at this point, but 2 years at that time, the United Arab Emirates has had someone in charge of AI, which is different than the United States where we don't have anyone in charge of anything, it seems like right now, but certainly don't have anyone in charge of artificial intelligence. And so I interviewed him on stage about what this means for the energy sector. We're thinking about what does AI mean for energy, what does it mean for jobs, what does it mean for resources. So that was the first time I connected AI with the resources, was 2019. And then since 2022 with generative AI becoming very available with all these handy platforms. Is that better? Okay, I'm gonna, do you want me to repeat everything I said already? I thought it wasn't on, but I wasn't sure. Anyway, so thank you for turning that on. I was trying to bellow, so now I don't have to bellow as much. The way it's shown up the last few years is people asking me a lot of questions. What is this going to do to the grid? What is this going to do to our rates? What's this going to do to reliability? What's it going to do to emissions? What's it going to do to water? Mm-hmm. And so in 2019, we're thinking about what's AI going to do to energy. And now we're thinking like, how is the energy water system going to react or respond or be hampered by or impacted by AI? So we do a lot of grid modeling to think about what this does for the grid. And the answer is it's good or bad, depending how you do it. The answer for water is it's good or bad, depending how you do it. And the answer for carbon is it's good or bad, depending how you do it. And for humanity, it's good or bad, depending on how you do it, right? So we're at this inflection point where we're all going to be liberated and be rich, or we're going to go extinct, right? So we have this singularity, and that's kind of the same kind of split or fork in the road for everything. And we do some of the modeling or analysis on that. So that's what I'm thinking about today, is what AI means for that. And personally, I think it's kind of exciting to have a rich customer class come along and say, hey, we'll pay to upgrade the grid. Let's see if that's true, but that sounds very exciting to me.
Very cool. All right, well, we'll explore those topics more today. So, Phillip, how about you?
Sure. Is this on? Can you all hear me? Great. Everybody, thanks for having me here today. Phillip Duran with the City of Austin, Office of Climate Action and Resilience. I probably should have added a couple other things to my bio. I'm also a UT alum, School of Engineering.
Right.
Yeah, electrical and computer engineering. And relevant to this conversation, I was an educator for several years, including being a teacher's assistant here at UT for some engineering classes. So very much this is in my space, in my lane. So what do I do at the city? I tell my mom that I'm the climate scientist for the City of Austin, because if I don't, she tells her friends that I work in climate control, which is just like very confusing. But that's kind of what I do. That's part of what I do. It's related to math or science or emerging technology at the city. And somebody needs to become an overnight expert or a deep expert in something, that usually falls to me if it's in climate action resilience. And as we all know, AI is just at the top of everybody's mind. And so it is very much something that we're getting asked about from our electeds, from our city leadership, and we're thinking about it from a couple of different perspectives. One, you've probably seen, it's been in the news a lot lately, but the City of Austin is projecting budget shortfalls in the not too distant future, maybe even this next fiscal year. But the task at hand is not getting any smaller. Austin continues to grow, and the demand on public services are growing with it, with that population increase. And so we're always trying to get creative and think about how can we do more with less, and how can we provide more better services to our citizens. On the other hand, the City of Austin also owns its own energy utility, its own water utility, its own waste utility, other things. And as both of the other panelists have alluded to, AI is intrinsically linked and is going to impact those sectors and the way that we administer those utilities as a municipal entity. So thinking about it a lot, and it is something that I think that it's good to have these kinds of conversations about, because it's a difficult question that is unavoidable. It's coming for us, and so we have to be thinking about it and talking about it now before it's just come and gone, and it's the train's left the station. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Phillip. Let's work on that, the education connection that we all have sitting up here. And, you know, as we've heard today throughout the conference, we're using AI tools to assist us in research, teaching, and learning here on the UT campus. And so what is it that we as UT students, faculty, staff, and researchers, what should we be keeping in mind and weighing when we use AI tools? Who wants to start? Phillip,
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start down here. Gosh, this is the big question, right?
Yeah.
How is it affecting our lives, and in particular, how is it going to affect the next generation? Somebody on the student panel earlier when I stepped in had a good comment about there are folks probably in this room that were never alive without the internet. And if you think about it generationally, maybe the perspective is a little different. I do not have the luxury of not having been alive before the internet, and certainly we were all around before AI was a thing. And so we look at it from our lens. Just curious, let's do an experiment. Can everybody raise their hand for me? Like I said, I was an educator, so I got to get student involvement. Okay, leave your hand up if you've ever used AI, like a large language model. Okay. Cool. Leave your hand up if you've used it in the last week. Leave your hand up if you've used it in the last 24 hours. Wow. Leave your hand up if you're a student. Wow, I gotta say that did not go as I expected it to go. Can students raise their hands? Students in the room? Okay, got a few. Okay, that makes more sense. So I guess I'm just talking to you here. This may not be a hot take, but I said it the other day to some of our leadership, and it raised some eyebrows. I think that for folks that are earlier in their career, or perhaps not a subject matter expert yet, or haven't really built up a strong foundation of knowledge and tools and sort of getting the basics right, AI poses the most risk to them as productive professionals going forward. Mm-hmm. I think for folks like myself and the other panelists up here, and probably a lot of folks in the room, if you've learned the basics and you understand it, and you ask AI to do something and produce it for you, you're going to be a way better gauge of whether or not what comes out is good or whether or not it's garbage. Which maybe that's strong language, but for you younger folks out there, I guess I would caution you against relying too heavily on these tools. I say kind of glibly sometimes, wake up in the morning and choose to cognate, choose to think first and use these tools as support, as a mechanism to improve and hone your message or your product, but don't let it become a crutch. That would be my word of warning, particularly to the young folks in the room.
Great.
So I think my take on it is maybe a little bit different, because I feel like that what's most important is that we shift our mindset to a mindset of awareness. I think that it's really important that we know what it is that we're doing and the results of where it comes from, just like I said before. Understanding the physical ramifications of compute, but then also being clear on the purpose with which you're using something for. I know that we seem to kind of conflate quite a bit of saying AI and meaning a whole bunch of different things. I mentioned that I have children. I've taught both of them how to read. I did not hand them a dictionary and say good luck, right, when I was teaching them how to read. I think that same when we're talking about cognitive or generative AI and LLMs, I think that it's not useful if you don't know how to think clearly. I don't think it's useful if you don't know how to ask good questions, and it's not useful if you don't have good judgment, right? And so even if I handed my 8-year-old ChatGPT, it would only go so far for her, right? Because she doesn't know how to ask those critically thinking questions to be able to get a good result. And then I think that also in working for a tech company, there are massive amounts of tools out there. There are massive things for accessibility, for like being able to learn on a small scale, and things that are geared towards children and helping them to build on the level that they're at, and teaching them how to use these tools. Like I mentioned before, you know, it reminds me of streaming services and Napster, right? It reminds me of Blockbuster and streaming coming online, right? This is something that is going to take over our lives, whether we like it or not. And it is important that we know how to use it ethically, that we know how to use it in a way that it amplifies our cognition, not replaces it, and that we know how to use it intentionally with purpose, so it helps to maximize our efficiency, and also so that it can drive a particular type of impact. To me, this is just a tool, right? It's just a tool that you can use in any way depending on what it is that you're putting into it. It does not exist without us, right? So it's similar to when Google came out with one of its models, and it was just pulling in information from how people use it. And it turned out that it was incredibly racist. It had all kind of bias because that was how people were using it, right? So then they had to put in all of these different stopgaps and making sure that it wasn't, spitting out all this crazy stuff. Same thing when the internet came out, right? People were like, oh my God, they're just gonna sit in their room in the dark and that's all they're gonna do, right? Well, maybe some people did that, but maybe they were sitting in the dark doing that anyways, right? So it depends on who you are, how you've learned how to use it, how you've grown up using it, and whether or not you also understand the massive amount of tools that come off of the technology, right? So I work in innovation, I work with startups, and there is so much coming out that it's regulating our lights, it's regulating, like just all kinds of things that you really couldn't even imagine. That's not just ChatGPT. That's just barely scratching the surface. So with my kids, I do very much, I feel that this is on us to be the educators of how do you use this responsibly, right? Again, if you don't know how to spell, a dictionary is useless. If you don't know how to think, ChatGPT is useless, right? And so it is not just another form of Google. You can build agents, you can code using it. There's a lot of things that you can do, and there's tons of technology that is extremely useful. And if you go into the job market and you don't know how to make this useful, you don't know how to use it ethically, and you don't know how to distinguish between AI slop and genuinely creative things that have come out using this tool, you will absolutely be behind.
Well said, Michael.
I teach a variety of classes at UT. I teach a class called Energy, Technology, and Policy, which is an upper division, a graduate class in engineering, policy, business, and geosciences. I teach energy entrepreneurship. I teach thermodynamics, which is a core engineering class, and I teach energy at the movies, which is for the liberal arts kids, which is a lot of fun. And let me talk about thermodynamics and energy at the movies. So thermodynamics, it's really important to me that students learn some engineering intuition about what is physically impossible or not thermodynamically. If we're engineers, we're going to build a bridge, and we get an answer from the computer that doesn't make any sense, we need to have the discernment to recognize that it's not a good answer. So I'll think back when I was an undergrad, we had a fluid mechanics problem, and we had to design the size of a propeller for a speedboat. And a lot of students would get an answer that the optimal size propeller is like 16 feet across for a 5-foot wide speedboat, which doesn't make any sense. And our professor would just kind of rail on us, just because the calculator gives you the answer 16 feet doesn't mean that makes any sense for a 5-foot wide speedboat. You have to have discernment. And so in the 80s and 90s, the professors were worried that we would not learn engineering intuition because calculators would ruin our ability to think because we couldn't recognize whether the answer made sense or not. Now I'm worried that with AI, our students will have the ability to discern what makes sense or not thermodynamically. The good news is Claude and ChatGPT and these models, when I plug in my thermodynamics exam, they can't solve them yet. So I got a little bit of time. Next year, maybe they can. And my exams are pencil and paper in the classroom. There's no Claude or there's no AI in there. They got to know it. But it has changed the role of homework. Homework is now no longer useful as a measure of student performance. Any homework, take-home project, take-home paper, take-home problems, they're worthless from an assessment perspective. So I assign homework for thermodynamics, and I say you have to turn it in, but I'm not going to grade it. Either you turned it in or you didn't. You might have cheated. I have no idea. But those problems are going to be on the exam. If I were you, I'd go ahead and master it, because I'm going to give you the same problems in the exam. And when it comes time to the exam, you're not going to have the support of the AI system. So for some engineering classes, we can make ourselves AI-proof. It makes the assessment different. It's all exam now, or all attendance. Homeworks are meaningless. And then for energy at the movies, which is a liberal arts essay class, we used to do a semester-long essay. A semester-long essay is now worthless with AI tools. So I was like, well, what are we going to do now? So we went back to Blue Book essay exams in the classroom, and some of you probably remember the Blue Books. And Blue Books are sold out. Like, you have to order them in advance because everyone's going back to Blue Books because they're AI-proof. And so I did a bunch of short answer essay exams every week, every single week. The students were not happy about this. Just to be clear, this is a way to be unpopular as a professor. But by week 4, they started to get on board, like, okay, we get what you're doing, which I wanted them to think critically and have to write. But this is actually physically challenging now because we don't teach cursive anymore. And it's actually physically tiring to print for 30 minutes. Yep. And cursive is valuable if you're going to write longhand because it takes less motion and it's less exhausting and all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to rethink how we teach penmanship and other stuff. at third grade or whenever you might learn it in whatever state you're from. And so these two different worlds, AI has disrupted the class in different ways. But I kind of tell them, use AI all you want. It's not going to help you when you're in the classroom writing the essay, but you could use it to say, hey, can you, because I don't tell them the essay prompts. I've said if I were a student, I would use AI to help me think of what are 10 possible essay prompts for this particular assignment to help prepare. They can think through it. So you can use AI as a preparatory tool in that case. So far, I'm trying to make my classes AI-proof or not, but AI is everywhere. It's just like the internet. And I remember in the 90s at grad school, we debated whether internet search was cheating. Our view in the 90s was if you didn't go to the card catalog and look at the index cards in the library, that was cheating. That Wikipedia and Google search was Google didn't exist. We used to play softball against the Google guys, by the way. I was doing intramural softball against these computer science students launching a search engine company called Google. We're like, good luck with that. Anyway, so the search engines were considered cheating. Now it's the standard first place you go for a lot of this. So the tools become standard tools. At first we consider them cheating because it's not the way I did it or whatever. But I think it will disrupt things. It mostly disrupts how you do assessment. And so we have to catch up on that. And basically, I think it means more small classes and more in-class written essay exams. It means more oral exams, which is the way education was until there was a push for efficiency in the 70s with larger classes and more standardized assessment. But if we go to smaller classes and more old school assessment, we'll be fine, at least from that perspective. Anyway, so that's coming up in my classroom some.
Yeah.
It's old as new again.
It's old as new, yeah. I mean, I think the law school with Socratic method will be impervious to this, right?
Yeah.
Where when you have to stand and deliver, and either you know it or you don't know it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's not bad, and we need to go
I
back
don't
to
think
that.
that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
I don't think
go
it's a
back to
bad
that.
thing.
Yeah. What great themes around, I mean, we still have to have our judgment there. We might change a lot of the processes that we're using, and we certainly need to use AI, but we've got to have that human judgment sitting there at the core. Let me shift a little bit and ask, what kind of things are you most concerned about when it comes to AI's impact on water and energy resources?
I think about this a lot. So the numbers are scary for a variety of reasons. It feels like electricity is scarce. It feels like water is scarce. And there are a variety of reasons why those are not just fears, they're actuality of what's going on in the ground. And then now you have all these data centers coming in, and our demand for electricity has been like this for 25 years, and now demand's going to go like that. And water's been growing like that, but the rainfall's been falling, so we got all these contrasts in Texas. And I guess there are a couple things. One is all the claims about how many data centers we're going to build for AI are not true. We'll build a fraction of them, but still a fraction of a large number, still a large number. So it will still be a strain in the system if we're not mindful. The electricity is dramatic. It's a lot of power. It's a lot of electricity around the clock. If we do it the wrong way, it will strain the grid, it will drive up rates, it will make the grid less reliable, and it will cause more carbon emissions. If we do it the right way, and data centers operate in a flexible manner, it will actually lower electric rates for all of us and make the grid more reliable, and depending on how we get data center developers to do it, might actually reduce carbon emissions. That's a pretty big difference. Is it going to make everything worse or make everything better or some combination? I think it's up to us, frankly, in terms of what kind of expectations we impose upon the system or expect from the system. The same could be said of water. So these chips are really hot. If you take a computer rack 2 years ago, a computer rack like my height, but deeper than me, but maybe my width, that was like 15 kilowatts 2 years ago. 15 kilowatts is 3 to 5 houses in Texas. Like a cul-de-sac of homes is one computer rack. This year, it is already 10 times bigger, say 150 kilowatts. By the end of the year, it'll be like 400 to 600 kilowatts per rack. Next year, it'll be a megawatt, 1,000 kilowatts per computer rack. A megawatt is an HEB superstore, but in one rack, hundreds of racks in a row in one building, multiple buildings on a site. So it's incredible power density, which means a lot of heat you have to take away. And that means water cooling. Now, water cooling within the data center is closed loop. The water touches the chip, takes the heat away, goes back somewhere else. And then you have another loop to cool that water loop. And that cooling loop might be air-cooled or water-cooled. And if it's water-cooled, that's a lot of water. If it's air-cooled, we'll be fine. And so there should be a push probably for air cooling. However, air cooling's less efficient, so you drive up your energy. So there's all sorts of trade-offs between the efficiency of water cooling versus the energy efficiency of water cooling versus the water efficiency of air cooling. We're gonna have to figure this out. But we're already seeing some compromises or negotiations going on in El Paso. Meta has said they're gonna build a big water-positive data center by doing air cooling and also paying for irrigation efficiency at dairy-bearing farms. Wow. And then we have other systems like that outside of San Antonio, Medina County. Microsoft's going to build a big data center, and the water utility said, we can't give you 1 million gallons a day, but you ask for, if you do air cooling, that's 150,000 gallons a day. That's 85% reduction. We can provide that. And so we just have to talk about it and say, that's a lot of water. It's like 0.4% of all water use in Texas goes to data centers. Not a big deal, but in your county, it might be 100% of the next water that's available.
Yeah.
And if it grows the way we expect to grow, it'll grow up to like 2%. Okay, that's big. It's not as big as alfalfa or some other things, but still it's big enough to matter. So I think we just should be smart problem solvers and say, well, let's not be sloppy about this. Let's be water efficient, energy efficient, and we can. But I want to kind of convey the sense that it's actually up to us whether it happens that way or not. It's not going to happen automatically. We have to say, we'd really like it if you made the grid better, not worse, and we'd really like it if you made the water system better, not worse. That's reasonable of us to expect and ask for. And I think most data center developers, most of the responsible ones are on board.
Yeah, that's great. Phillip, how does this work at the city?
A lot of similar themes to what you're talking about. Data centers come to mind first, for sure. Recently, City Council passed a resolution that directed my office, our office, and our water and energy utilities to look at how new and upcoming data centers were going to affect our electricity and water reliability and supply. That was one of those instances where I was asked to become kind of an overnight expert in something. And I kind of knew a little bit about this. We work with utilities a lot, of course. But I learned more about the obligation to serve that our utilities have. So both Austin Water and Austin Energy and Austin Resource Recovery, for that matter, for residents. If a customer comes to them and says, we require service and our service is going to be this big, megawatts or kilogallons or whatever, they are required to take the appropriate steps to fulfill that request on some timeline. The timeline is really the big question mark there. And in developing our response to that City Council resolution and to some extent our plan moving forward, I also became aware of a single request that Austin Energy fielded, and I won't tell you who it's from, that would have it instantly doubled the demand for electricity in their service territory.
Wow.
Obviously, they can't fulfill that request in the short term, and sort of the timeline is really, it's kind of where the sausage is made, right? That's where the devil is. But it just really drove home to everybody that was working on that response how big of a deal this potentially is. And I agree, it can go a lot of different ways. If you live here in Austin or in Texas, you've lived through the last several years of power going out, maybe your water hasn't been on, or maybe it wasn't safe to drink. And we know that those services and those resources are perhaps seemingly fragile and very, very important to our lives and like the comfort and the quality of life and everything in our community. And so the idea of introducing a bunch of data centers that further put strains on those resources doesn't seem very appealing to a lot of folks. But it's going to be a lot of investment. ERCOT is perhaps uniquely positioned as a grid to be nimble and innovative in that space moving forward, particularly if there is a wealthy class that's going to pay for upgrading it. So those are some things that are swirling. At the beginning of this panel, I sort of said I look at it from two perspectives. One, what is it going to do to the strain on our services? And then two, like, what can we do with it? So not to be all doom and gloom, to focus a little bit more on the positive. We're exploring a way to use AI to monitor energy and water use starting with city facilities, but potentially it could go beyond to the entire community, or if you want to get really ambitious, why not the entire state? But if done correctly, it could monitor water and energy use at facilities in near real time. Both of our utilities have these things called smart meters where they measure electricity and water consumption at like 10-minute intervals, 60-second intervals, 15-second intervals. And in the past, computations were not really there, or perhaps models were not sophisticated enough to be taking that real-time data, just huge, huge data, and determining in that real time whether or not a building is behaving appropriately and inappropriately, for example. But AI is a tool that actually unlocks that potential for us. Some of our early tests have shown that we could potentially decrease electricity use at a facility by as much as 15% over the course of a month, just sort of in like the peaks and troughs and sort of the edge cases. And so it's my job to look at it from both sides, and that is definitely a huge potential upside of AI in my line of work.
That's great. And Dawn, you're working with a lot of different clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to hear what you're seeing from them?
Yeah, so I mean, I would, there's certainly a specific kind of use case that we talk about here in Texas, but if we kind of pull ourselves out of Texas and look globally and what's happening with a lot of the hyperscalers and such across the world, it's not just pulling on local resources or pulling on local grids. If you look at Google, AWS and Microsoft, they've all brokered pretty large deals with nuclear facilities, converting those nuclear facilities to specifically power their data plants, so they're not, their data centers, so they're not pulling out of the local grid. There's a lot of innovation that's coming around those cooling systems where they're replacing water with different types of fluid technologies. There's some startups that have some interesting solutions in that space. When I was working at Microsoft, we were experimenting with underwater data centers and to solve that cooling problem and to also use a different type of fluid for those cooling systems. There's a lot of innovation around circularity as well to be able to reuse that water, reuse also the actual equipment itself so that we're not creating as much waste. And there's also a lot of different types of renewable energy. So we have an energy mix in there. So we're not just using grid energy, but we're also bringing in solar, wind, and then again, there's or geothermal as well, geothermal and hydro water. But that's all very dependent on siting. So I work with one company where we look at the demand around data centers, and then we look geographically, where are the best sites where we're not in water-constrained areas, where we have access to maybe geothermal or hydro, where we have access to some more renewable energies. And then there's a lot. When I talk to young people going into the industry, especially given our current political environment, they ask me where in sustainability would you say is a safe place. I always talk about battery storage because that is a huge area right now. I know specifically at Microsoft, they've invested a massive amount of resources into building these very large batteries that are able to run off of hydrogen fuel cell batteries. And that is using a different type of energy that, again, is not pulling from the local grid source. So there's a lot of these kind of different things sort of playing out. Some of that is here in Texas as well. Texas is one of the largest, I'm going to get my statistics wrong, but with wind and solar, some of the largest solar projects are happening right here in Texas. Same with wind. And that contributes a lot to not only a local grid, but also to these hyperscalers coming in and funding the renewable energy. So that's what I think about as far as how we think through the energy mix. And don't let me forget SMR. Those are the modular nuclear devices that are coming online as well that doesn't use kind of these large nuclear plants that we usually has a lot of hesitancy from the public. The other thing that I think about is when we talk about resources, in a lot of ways, a lot of these decisions are made in silos. The way that our water is thought about and utilized and the legislation around how water is used is separate than energy, which is separate than how we think about circularity and those type of things. And so when we come together to build a data center, build that infrastructure out, it's really important that we don't think about that in a silo. We were talking here on the panel as well about how important it is at this inflection point, which way we go, right? And that is very much dependent on us as a society, right? And so as a society, how do we influence those decisions? Usually it's through our local and state government, right? Usually it's how, when these bills come up, when a data center is being built, it's not just built in a day. I mean, there's years and years of planning. You have to go in, you have to talk to community, you have to have permits that are executed, right? So all of these things, there's a visibility to it. So demanding transparency around how it affects the grid, how it affects you and your community, And also with water resources, I worked a lot in water resources. The way aquifer systems work, you can be pulling the water over here and you're affecting the town over here, right? So making sure that we're aware of how we utilize our resources. Most people probably don't know when you know how electricity actually works. You know, when I worked in infrastructure, a lot of people don't know what happens to your water when you flush the toilet. They don't know what happens when you throw something out of your car and it goes into the sewer system, right? So a lot of people don't know how your utilities that come into your house are actually legislated, don't know what impact that you can have. And so that's where, you know, this visibility and demanding transparency comes in. And that is, you know, our leaders will do what we demand theoretically, right? So we should make sure that as a society, as a community, that we're very aware of how these things are happening. So the same way that we're educating our students and educating our children for what's coming, we should also be educating ourselves for how our resources are being used. So that, you know, we're not going to necessarily stop the wave, but we can be very intentional about how that wave hits.
Great thoughts there, y'all. I want to move us to kind of our last question before we open it up for other people to ask questions, and that is, if you could leave us with one action or question to ask or process to implement, what would that be? And if each of you can kind of be very succinct, that'll give us a lot of time to open it up for questions. So, Phillip, give a thought.
Sure. The world is a wild place right now, right? I think if you wanted to focus on the negative, there would be a lot to be upset about. I mean, I know I'm righteously upset on almost daily basis. In my space in climate action, if you're in this room, you're probably pretty familiar with the things that you could do as an individual, the individual actions you could take to lower your carbon footprint or to be more sustainable or to be more circular with your purchasing choices or whatever. And if you're not doing that, do that. It's definitely a call to action. But if you are doing those things, I would say take the next step. Go beyond the individual. Engage more with your local community, your neighborhood, your rec center, and most importantly, engage in the public process. I mean, I know I've worked at local, state, and federal levels of government, and I know at every level what the residents and citizens of your jurisdiction say matters, and most importantly, it matters at the city level. We listen. All of our departments do, and all of our utilities do, and so engage and be heard, and hopefully we can do better moving forward together.
That's great. Great. Michael?
Two things that might be within reach for you in terms of time and money are to consider only native plants and grasses for your yard and get an e-bike to displace some gasoline car trips. Those are all much bigger uses of resources than AI data centers or anything else, and are not that hard to change compared to, I don't know, building a big data center or stopping a data center. And I think that native grasses in particular, we spend so much water raising Carolina bluegrass or Bermuda grass, things like that, and it's just horrible. And then gasoline car trips, if you can either take fewer car trips or displace it with an e-bike is a way to go. An electric vehicle might be expensive, but e-bikes are not as bad. So those are things I think might be within reach for some people.
Well, I'm stopping by Texas Native Seed tomorrow to buy my native grass. So if the rain will continue, I'll have it out in a couple of days. Right. So thanks. Dawn?
I love that you said that.
Yeah, we didn't plan that ahead of time.
No, we didn't.
No, I think that's great. So I think, like, for me, you know, I really do look at this as a systems issue. And I think about this in relative to systems and our individual spheres of influence and how we can actually generate change in a positive way and being purposeful, having intention with how we're using the new technology as it comes through. And I also feel very strongly about change that you know, it depends on kind of how we direct that change, but change is always inevitable. And I feel that with everything that we talked about on this panel is that we are the designers of our future, right? We are the designers of how AI will be implemented and used into the future. We are the designers of how our resources will be implemented over the course of time, right, collectively. And so I feel that if I have anything that people should take away from this, is that this is not something that's happening to you. It's something that you are pushing out, and it's happening because of you, right? And so that you have more control than you think. We as a collective have massive control, much more than what we think. This is not something that is coming that we can't do anything about. I think that the habits that we build as individuals, the habits that we push out through our spheres of influence and through our communities and how we engage with our local governments, our state and our federal governments, is what will actually change the system and our resources so that we can be interdependent in a way that's useful and right for us moving forward. And same with being able to hand over this world to our children so that they're not grappling with our mistakes.
Thank you all so much. What an empowering set of messages. So I'd like to open it up for questions at this point. Yes, Julie.
So I get asked this question all the time from teachers and other educators about how to respond to students who say that they do not want to use AI in the classroom because of the environmental impact and water usage and energy usage. And most of the time, the students are saying something that they've heard somewhere else. Sometimes they're very well educated on the impact, but how should a faculty member respond to that question?
I've got all sorts of thoughts. So I've got concerns about AI in the classroom. The energy and water concerns of AI in the classroom are essentially zero. Like it rounds down to zero. It is nothing. If these schools are at all like the schools my kids go to, the long line of Suburbans and Cadillac Escalades dropping their kids off at school is orders of magnitude worse from a water, energy, and climate perspective. Like it's not even close compared to AI in the classroom. And if we really want to protect the environment, which I really, really think we should, and I think it's good that kids would want that, walking or riding to school is the first most important priority, but we probably have designed the city so that they cannot do that. If they are in a place where it's walkable, rideable, they should walk or ride, or take the school bus, which is designed for efficiency. If they don't live in a walkable neighborhood, I think working with your ZAPCO, your zoning planning commission, or what work with commissions do this. So we've designed our schools such that the energy consumption is built into the drop-off line. And I think that is a huge issue. Also, those tailpipes are at nose level for a lot of the kids, and the particulate matter is a killer. And so, anyway, so I appreciate the sensitivity to AI, but I'm like, okay, that's not the problem here. The problem here is getting to school and back. That's probably the bigger concern. That's what I would say. That's pretty harsh to come as like, oh, what's there? Your parents dropping you off as a problem. But I think that's an issue, and some of us probably grew up in walkable neighborhoods, not everyone did. And that's a real challenge. That's like urban design and city plan. That's a very different kind of problem. Anyway, how's that for a non-answer? That doesn't address the issue in the classroom at all. Okay.
Any other thoughts, or we're going to open it up for more questions?
Yeah, I guess I have a thought I would add. Did you have something?
You can go ahead.
Okay. But first, I want to shamelessly shill for Austin Energy and e-bikes, because agreed, I always say that e-bikes are the most accessible form of EV, and you're going to apply for a rebate from Austin Energy and probably get half off your e-bike. So,
in terms of pounds of CO2 avoided per dollar, e-bikes are by far the best policy lever in the world.
Yeah, we have two, and we try to stay out of our cars and use them as much as possible. That's a great question, and it's one that I think applies. It's like outside of the classroom too, right? At our office, we have a lot of folks, a lot of staff that are passionate and like very values motivated, right? Myself included. And so we think about it all the time, and we're currently going through an internal process of trying to develop in-house guidance and best practices for like how we use AI in a way that's values aligned. We don't have an answer yet, so I don't have an answer for you. But one interesting point that has been brought up is that like one, compromise is important. So like, is the course asking too much of AI, of the student to use AI? Where can we meet in the middle there? And then on the other side of that, this is perhaps the more brutal response to a student, and I hate to even say this, but I will, is if they don't use AI, and the other students do, or their competitors in the workforce later on do, are they falling behind as a result? And I don't know that like that's why you have to use it, but I think that it is an inevitable reality of the workplace and of school moving forward. And you can't just completely ignore a set of tools that everybody else is going to be using. Yeah, that's what I might think to say.
Yeah, so the way I would look at it, if, my oldest daughter, she brings up that concern quite a bit. And, I think that, yes, there is kind of a hierarchy of priorities of things that you can do that'll be more impactful. But I also, kind of take it for what it's worth. She's concerned about it. So what I recommend is to get involved, right? There are large workloads that are going into these data centers, right, that are contributing. So look at the companies that are contributing these large workloads. A university also, this large infrastructure also is investing in different stocks and doing, so getting involved in how the university is, impacting, this space, right? Like the decisions that it's making, the type of AI that it's using, making sure that you're educating yourself around the different innovations about it. There are some really, really interesting things that are coming out right now that are, tying into innovations with water usage and innovations around energy and energy storage, getting involved in are the data centers near you and the infrastructure built environment folks, the EPCs, are they using these type of innovations that are, creating these efficiencies and using less water? Are they doing that? Get involved, right? Get involved in the local government and people that are making those decisions. Show up at the community meetings where the companies are coming and talking about it, right? Get active about it. If that's something that you're concerned about, get active so that you're educating yourself and that you can be influential about the decisions that are being made on your behalf within your sphere of influence. And then that way, not only can you start, being able to critically think about which priorities are important, similar to what we just spoke about, using e-bikes is maybe more useful than, not using ChatGPT. But I think that it's still valid to have the concern. I just think that you should, just get involved, get active, and there's a lot of avenues to do that, especially like we're hearing here in Austin, there's a lot of things that you can learn. And that way, the concern becomes an educated concern.
Can I make one more comment? I know I already spoke. Can I add on one thing? So if for teachers who might be interested in this, I have support from the state of Texas. I teach a 3-day short course, Energy Technology Policy, this summer that is free for teachers. And normally costs over $1,000 or something like that, but teachers have to get continuing ed, and often it's hard to find free options. But if you know any teacher that wants a free 3-day course on energy, we'll discuss these exact issues in that course. It's June 30th, July 2nd. I'm happy to share the information later with that. But we'd love to get some energy, water, climate, and other information in front of teachers wherever we can. And the state's very generous to support this.
That's great. All right, another question.
We answered all the questions already.
We got covered. Look at us.
Yeah.
Really, we have a positive set of solutions sitting there. Well, I have a question while people are thinking of theirs, and that is, so are there any innovations or changes that universities can make to maybe to help with some of these water and energy concerns? Anybody have thoughts on that?
I'm a professor. I've got thoughts on everything, so that's not a fair question because I always have something to say. But the UT's been very good on water efficiency, using purple water and reclaimed water for irrigation, for example. And I think that's great. UT's been very efficient on energy. UT's more worried about energy efficiency than climate cleanliness. We have a very good natural gas combined cycle power plant, the most efficient power plant in the world, which is really amazing. But it's natural gas, and so if you're really worried about climate, you might be upset about the emissions. But it's really energy efficient and really water efficient. This is great. And then we have a lot of demonstration of solar water heating on the Hackerman building and solar panels up at the Pickle Research Campus. And So I think there are a lot of things we can be proud of at the university that's quite good. And this is kind of fun for me because Texas is hilarious. Texas does all the right things for all the wrong reasons quite often. And so we're a world leader, as you said, on wind and solar and batteries and hydrogen and carbon capture. We're also the 6th dirtiest region in the world for CO2. Like, we're dirtier than Germany or South Korea or Australia, you name it. We're a global scale polluter, yet we're doing all the things for clean energy. Right. And I'd love to go talk to Stanford or MIT, you name it, where they have coal-fired power plants or something like our power plant's cleaner than yours. So there's a lot we can do. I don't think there's a lot of awareness by the student body about quite how self-sufficient we are on that or how clean we are. So there's a lot more we can do on that, and I'd love to get students plugged in on some of those efforts.
There could possibly even be a way to explain that to students.
It's there if you know where to look for it, but it's not obvious. It's not right in your face.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And so whenever they do say, I'm against using AI for these reasons, if we can give them some resources, I really appreciated the fact that it's, validate the fact that they have values base there, that it's coming from, explain to them that there are some options, and tie in and tell them some about what the institutions that they're attending are doing about these exact issues. Yeah. I think those are all great suggestions. All right, y'all, we have time for probably one more good, solid question and still get out on time, which is important. Yes.
The innovations in education that we did about 50 years ago are what have shaped our world and the sustainability in it. So if you were to learn from whatever mistakes we made 50 years ago, what would you say were those mistakes and which we should not repeat?
Well, one thing I would say, and this just comes from my history of working in traditional energy, namely oil and gas, is how we cite a lot of the infrastructure, new infrastructure that we're putting in. And in a lot of cases, a lot of this infrastructure is going into communities that don't have the resources to stop these large footprint infrastructure buildings that come in. Data centers do emit, they do strain resources. And same when we look at refineries, look at a lot of the factories, coal fire plants, those type of things, they tend to go into communities and areas of historically marginalized communities. And that is a mistake that many of the super majors that I've worked with and smaller energy companies are still fighting lawsuits to this day over and over again. And this is a global, this is not just the United States, but I look at other countries where a lot of these factories are filthy and they go into these communities and poison the water, poison the air, and because they don't have the money or the type of what's necessary from a government or from a legal standpoint to fight back some of these companies, it's hundreds of years, it's 150 years of pollution that these communities are fighting. And I worked quite a bit with DACA, the carbon capture plants, or the number of different types of clean energy or carbon removal systems, and we're repeating the same things. Where are we going to site these things? Where we're going to put it in the place where the permitting's easier for us to push through. We're going to put it in areas where the community isn't going to show up and fight back. We're going to put it in places where there's not enough, there's not enough people that are wealthy enough of influence, where they don't want the wastewater treatment plant in their backyard, right? They don't want the prison in their backyard. They don't want the plants in their backyard, and they don't want the data centers in their backyard either. That is a mistake that we made 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and we're still making that today.
Yep.
I often say that the biggest mistake that we made as sustainability professionals or climate professionals, or throw in resilience now too, since that's a buzzword, is that we either didn't do a good enough job or let somebody else do the job of defining those topics for us. I mean, like if we all filled out a silent survey, how many people are in the room here? 100? We probably get 100 different definitions of resilience, right? For AI, I think we're probably in a similar place. I mean, I'm not sure that it's necessarily the definition of AI, but I think it's the understanding of it. Like, what is it? What can it do? What does it mean for us as a society, or what does it mean for our next generation of students and professionals? And what are the potential pitfalls there? And I mean, that's what we're talking about here today. But I think that if we were to fast forward 20 years and look at the workforce then, or the state of AI, we would probably want to come back to today and be like, we should have done a better job just preparing people for this thing that was coming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. To wrap up, I'll just make a quick comment there that I think that a lot of times we forget history, right? And we don't bring it up enough. And this coming from someone trained as a STEM researcher and now a social scientist, I didn't learn history well. And I am constantly reminding people today that we don't want to repeat what we can learn from our history. So I think that educational institutions are in a really great place to be able to push that message forward and look forward to taking a lot of the positive ideas that people had here today and the cautions and seeing if it can't make a difference in the future. So thank you all for a wonderful afternoon. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you.